When someone comes and approaches me and has a question about Australian immigration, first question I ask them is, well, what's your long-term goal here? You need to have a strategy, or you need to have a clear pathway for what it is that you're trying to achieve. For a lot of people who come to Australia, who come here to study, they may come simply to earn a degree and to obtain some work experience, and then eventually to go home. Or for other people, they might be here to become a citizen and a permanent resident of Australia. And we're going to touch on both topics and talk about common pathways, visa outcomes, and how these are achieved in different scenarios. So option one, earn a degree and some experience. And some general advice on coming to Australia to earn a degree and get some experience. The first thing that in my mind is really important if you come to study here in Australia is to ensure that after you've finished your studies, you qualify for the post-study work visa under subclass 485. This is a really good end result for someone who's invested their time and their money in studying in Australia to then obtain another visa to allow them to live and work in Australia. Denise is an excellent example of this. Denise came to Australia to study a master's degree. She's completed her degree. She's now able to apply for and has applied for a post-study work visa. So it's really important that if you make this commitment and you make this investment in your future, that you understand what the criteria is so that you do qualify for the 485 visa. I talk to too many people, students here in Australia, who were either poorly advised or didn't understand what the criteria was to ensure that they qualify for the post-study work visa. So in brief, the criteria to ensure that you are eligible is to make sure that your degree is equivalent to 2 academic years. Some people will come to Australia who have already earned a degree in their home country or have earned credits to a degree in their home country, and they might apply those credits to a qualification here in Australia, which means that they can complete the qualification sooner than 2 academic years. And this initially looks good because it might cost them less to do that and they finish quicker, but they've disadvantaged themselves overall because they might not then qualify for the post-study work visa. So the post-study work visa says that you must complete your degree qualification in a minimum of 2 academic years, and that you must be present here in Australia for at least 16 months. You must have applied for an Australian police check before you apply for the 485. You must have a valid English language test, and you must maintain your health insurance. Now, there's other criteria as well, so those are not the only criteria, but those are the big ones, and those are the ones that a lot of people get caught up on. So those are things that people should be aware of before they come to Australia, or whilst they're here in Australia and they're studying. They might make decisions, they might swap courses, and these decisions which they make could then have detrimental effects upon their future ability to qualify for 485. Importantly, choosing a course that qualifies for 485, there's pros and cons on both sides. Choosing a degree level course, some advantages would be that you probably have a higher possibility of landing a professional job, which will give you a higher rate of pay. Once you have the 485, you have flexibility in your life in regards to who you can work for and the type of work that you can do. The 485 is a fairly simple visa. It's quite easy to apply for, and as long as you understand the regulations, then it's very likely that you'll be approved for this visa. It's a good visa also because you can add and include your dependent partner on the application as well. But with pros, there's always 2 sides to the coin, so there's always a con as well. So studying a degree level course can be expensive, and Denise can attest to this. She's paid a lot of money in student fees to study at a very good university in Melbourne. But with that good university comes a good qualification. Also, there are work restrictions. but they come with exemptions also. So you've got to be understanding of the pros and the cons on both sides of the coin. Option 2, become a PR or a citizen. And I think for most people who I talk to who come to Australia, they're here to achieve an outcome. Most people want to become a permanent resident and potentially a citizen, or they want to have a long-term goal and pathway to other visa types here in Australia. And it's really important for people to understand the strategy from the get-go. So this is just some general advice and information about what can give you a pathway to permanent residency. So my advice to people when they're trying to set out to choose a course or to switch into a particular course is to choose a course of study that aligns to the medium and long-term strategic skills list of Australia. So the Australian government basically categorised different occupations into different skill lists. And at the moment, we have a medium to long-term list and we have a short-term list as well. Now, ideally, you'd like to place yourself in a course of study and in an occupation which aligns to the medium to long-term list. And the reason you would do that is because the medium to long-term list occupations which have been identified by the federal government as being in high demand. And because they're in high demand, they've been recognised as occupations which should have a pathway through to permanent residency. When you study an occupation on this particular list and you qualify for the 485 visa, this in itself might not be enough to actually achieve a permanent residency visa. It's probably unlikely, in fact, that you go from a student visa to a 485 visa and then on to permanent residency. It's possible, and I see it, and I saw it recently actually with a client of ours who studies software development here in Australia and was able to gain enough work experience whilst on the 485 visa to then get invited to apply for a subclass 190 through a state-sponsored visa with New South Wales. And that was a really excellent outcome for the client. They had previously decided they would pursue a training visa and their employer was willing to support that application. And the training visa is a really good stepping stone. And what a lot of people need to understand is that it's difficult to go from 485 directly to permanent residence, and you may need to look at other visa types to bridge the gap between there and a permanent residency visa. And the training visa under subclass 407 is a really excellent visa to utilise in order to gain further experience. The other visa that we're talking about on this particular slide, the employer-sponsored 482, requires that you have 2 years of relevant experience in order to be eligible for that particular visa. So in a lot of examples, I see people who have studied, who have gone to the 485 visa, and the 485 visa is granted for 2 years, but similarly, you need 2 years of experience to qualify for the 482. So a lot of people fall short of those 2 years of experience before they can qualify for the 482. And in that case, they use the 407 training visa to get more experience, provide them a stepping stone and a pathway to another visa, which ultimately then can lead to permanent residency. So once you've used one of these stepping stones, whether it be the 485, the 407, the 482, there's a lot of numbers there, guys. I know it's confusing. But, and we talk a lot of jargon in this business, I know, but you need to come to grips with these numbers that we use for subclasses. But once you use one of these visas, your ultimate goal and aim should then be to qualify for a permanent residency visa. And one of those permanent residency visas could be the state-sponsored 190 or an employer-sponsored 186. You can get to the employer-sponsored 186 through 2 different streams. There's a direct entry and there's a temporary residence transition scheme as well. As I'm speaking to you, as I'm explaining these things, I understand that there is a lot of jargon and there is a lot of information and it is very confusing. And this is part of our reason for the presentation tonight, to try and demystify some of the information which is out there and to give people clearer understanding of how they identify a pathway. And the other thing I would say is that everyone is an individual and everyone's circumstances are individual, And you need someone like myself or another migration agent to give you clear advice about what the pathway is from where you are now through to permanent residency. So the long-term strategies to obtain permanent residency, as I've touched on, using an occupation and a course of study which aligns to an occupation on the medium to long-term list is a really good idea and would be my first suggestion. However, the medium to long-term list is a relatively short list as compared to the other list which exists, which is the short-term list and the regional list. And if you are going to study an occupation on the short-term list, then you need to understand what the pathway to permanent residency is through that type of occupation. And one of the things which you can do to give yourself a better advantage and a more likely outcome is to consider studying in a regional area. And studying in a regional area has many different benefits. It opens up opportunities for other visas, and opens up opportunities for multiple 485 visas, and it allows you potentially to qualify for another regional visa, which leads to permanent residency. Another tip that I would suggest that people try and concentrate on is, whilst you're studying on a 485 visa, whether you be in a regional area or a metropolitan area, is try and find an employer in your industry and try and secure some work experience. That's probably part-time work experience whilst you're on a student visa. But the success stories which I see from people studying in Australia is usually because whilst they were studying, they managed to find work experience with an employer in their industry, in their occupation, which then leads them to further visa outcomes. And I guess finally, one tip for those people who are still overseas, consider getting some work experience whilst you are overseas, which will add to the likelihood of you finding employment here in Australia. It's a difficult thing to come to Australia straight out of school and go to university to obtain a bachelor's degree and then walk straight into the employment market. It's probably more likely and in your advantage if you were to obtain some work experience whilst you're still at home in your home country.